The Cold War was one of the most defining periods of modern history, shaping the world in ways that are still felt today. Unlike most major conflicts, it was never officially declared as a war and was rarely fought directly between its main rivals. Instead, it was a prolonged struggle between powerful nations, competing ideologies, and opposing visions of how societies should be organized. For nearly half a century, the Cold War influenced global politics, determined the fate of entire regions, and placed the world under the constant threat of nuclear destruction. Understanding the modern world requires understanding what the Cold War was, why it began, and how it reshaped global history. At its core, the Cold War was a conflict between two fundamentally different systems. On one side stood the United States and its allies, who promoted capitalism, democratic governance, and individual freedoms. On the other side stood the Soviet Union and its allies, who supported communism, state-controlled economies, and one-party political rule. These were not minor disagreements, but opposing worldviews. Each side believed its system was not only superior, but essential for humanity's future. This belief made compromise difficult and distrust unavoidable. The origins of the Cold War lie in the aftermath of World War II. The war left Europe and large parts of Asia devastated. Cities were destroyed, economies collapsed, and millions of people were displaced. Out of this destruction, two nations emerged as global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Although they had fought together against Nazi Germany, their alliance was based on necessity rather than trust. Even before the war ended, tensions were forming due to ideological differences, historical experiences, and deep suspicion. The United States emerged from World War II economically strong and largely untouched by physical destruction. It possessed vast industrial capacity and financial resources. The Soviet Union, by contrast, had suffered enormous losses. Entire regions were destroyed, and millions of its citizens were killed. This experience shaped Soviet thinking, creating a deep focus on security and the prevention of future invasions. These different wartime experiences strongly influenced how each country approached the post-war world. Disagreements quickly surfaced over Europe's future. The United States believed that economic recovery and political stability were the best ways to prevent another global conflict. This belief led to the Marshall Plan, which provided financial aid to rebuild Western European economies. American leaders viewed the plan as a way to promote stability and prevent the spread of communism. The Soviet Union viewed the Marshall Plan as a threat. Soviet leaders believed it was designed to expand American influence and weaken communist movements. As a result, the Soviet Union rejected the plan and pressured Eastern European countries under its control to do the same. Instead, it created its own system of economic cooperation among communist states. This decision marked one of the earliest and clearest divisions between East and West. Europe soon became divided into two opposing blocs. Western Europe aligned with the United States, adopting capitalist systems and democratic institutions. Eastern Europe fell under Soviet influence, and communist governments were installed across the region. Countries such as Poland, East Germany, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia became part of the Soviet sphere. This division became known as the Iron Curtain, symbolizing the growing separation between two different worlds. As the Cold War took shape, both sides avoided direct military confrontation. The reason was nuclear weapons. By the late 1940s, both the United States and the Soviet Union possessed atomic bombs. Over time, these weapons became far more powerful, capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. This created a situation known as mutually assured destruction, where any direct nuclear conflict would result in the destruction of both sides. Because of this, neither side could afford to strike first. Instead of direct war, the Cold War was fought indirectly. Proxy wars became a defining feature of the conflict. These were wars in which the United States and the Soviet Union supported opposing sides in other countries. The Korean War was one of the earliest examples. Later, conflicts in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Africa, and Latin America were also shaped by Cold War rivalry. Local disputes often became global battlegrounds for influence. The Cold War extended far beyond military conflict. It was also a struggle for influence across politics, economics, culture, and technology. Both sides used propaganda to promote their system and discredit the other. Education, media, and popular culture were shaped by ideological messaging. Each side sought to prove that its way of life was more successful and more just. Technology became another major arena of competition. Space exploration emerged as a powerful symbol of national strength. When the Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite and later sent the first human into space, it shocked the world and challenged American confidence. The United States responded with massive investment in science and education, eventually landing astronauts on the moon. The space race was about prestige, influence, and technological dominance. Everyday life during the Cold War was shaped by fear and uncertainty. In many countries, people lived with the constant possibility of nuclear war. Governments built bomb shelters and conducted emergency drills. Political suspicion increased, particularly in the United States, where fear of communist influence led to investigations, loyalty tests, and blacklists. Careers were destroyed, and personal freedoms were restricted in the name of national security. In communist countries, political control was often stricter. Dissent was suppressed, surveillance was widespread, and opposition movements were tightly monitored. Governments justified these measures as necessary to protect the state from foreign threats. Ordinary people on both sides of the Cold War were affected by decisions made far above them. The Cold War was not constant in intensity. Periods of extreme tension were followed by moments of relative calm. One of the most dangerous moments occurred during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, when the discovery of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba brought the world close to nuclear war. After days of tense negotiation, a peaceful resolution was reached, highlighting how fragile global stability had become. Following this crisis, both sides recognized the need to reduce the risk of accidental war. Communication improved, and arms control agreements were signed. This period of reduced tension became known as détente. While rivalry continued, it was managed more carefully. The Cold War also reshaped global alliances. Military organizations such as NATO were formed to provide collective security among Western nations. In response, the Soviet Union established its own alliances. These structures reinforced global divisions and ensured that conflicts in one region could have worldwide consequences. By the late 20th century, the balance began to shift. The Soviet Union faced economic stagnation, political rigidity, and growing dissatisfaction among its population. Maintaining a vast military and competing with the United States placed enormous strain on its economy. At the same time, exposure to outside ideas increased pressure for change. In the 1980s, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms aimed at revitalizing the country. These reforms reduced state control over the economy and encouraged openness in society. They also improved relations with the West. While intended to strengthen the Soviet system, these changes weakened communist control over Eastern Europe. In 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall became a powerful symbol of the Cold War's collapse. Communist governments across Eastern Europe soon fell, often without violence. In 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved, bringing the Cold War to an end. Although the conflict ended, its legacy remains. Borders drawn during this period still exist. Alliances formed during the Cold War continue to shape international relations. Nuclear weapons, deterrence, and geopolitical rivalry did not disappear but evolved into new forms. The Cold War was not a single event, but a prolonged struggle that reshaped nations and lives across the world. Understanding it helps explain modern conflicts, global alliances, and international tensions. It remains one of the most important chapters in modern history, not because of how it was fought, but because of how deeply it changed the world.